So, over the past decade leading up to current day 2022, we've seen a rise in politics that have injected themselves into most facets of life, though one could argue that it's already been like that for a long time since humanity first began, though we're focusing mainly on current day issues in the political realm. These things include climate change, identity, politics. I mean, those are the two really big things, though I would say that more so in recent memory. And by recent memory, I mean the past couple years. It's been focused on identity politics, and even further I would say is a attack on freedom of expression or freedom in general. um, with everything we've seen over the past 2 years of the Cervasas bug, it's been a very big indicator about a lot of things, especially how free speech and freedom of expression is handled on the internet. And this is an issue that is connected with the entertainment industry and the issues there. What we've seen is a political viewpoint or a political party or a political way of thinking, one political way of thinking, dominate an entire industry. And by dominate, I mean run it, as in they're in charge, they're in full control, all things considered. And the sad thing is that we saw the early stages of this back in 2012. You could say that this has been in the works for longer. If you really start looking at things, if you start diving into subjects that would pertain to conspiracy theories, though I would say that the term conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist, it's being put in a bad light, which is funny because a lot of the conspiracy theories that have been talked about for years have been coming true. And of course, the people that called those talking about these things the kooky conspiracy theorist, they're in a sort of mental state of, yeah, you may be right, but you're still crazy type of thing. But I digress. The entertainment industry is creatively and morally bankrupt. We're seeing this come to light, particularly with Disney and their support or their expression of the whole "Don't Say Gay" bill fiasco. Which, if you guys already know, the bill in Florida had nothing to do with not saying gay, but it is curious and very telling that the people that are most vocal about this, about the problem with this bill being passed, happens to be from the alphabet community, right? It is curious as to why they feel so threatened by it. And certainly it's not everybody in that community. There are people that are in that community that don't feel threatened by this. That's just logical. It's never going to be one way 100% of the time. There's always going to be differences, there's always going to be a few outliers. It's never going to be something that's 100% set. What I mean is, when you have a community, that one community isn't going to agree on everything 100% of the time. You're going to find common ground, you're going to find similarities, you're also going to find differences. That's just the reality of the world. It is a reality of humanity. It's something that can't really be changed. And you really wouldn't want it changed anyway, because if everything was the same, then it would be boring. There'd be nothing new to explore. It would be bland. This sort of hive mindset or unilateral conformity to just follow the status quo, which is what a lot of people have done. I mean, we've seen this with the past 2 years where most of the world just conformed without questioning anything. And, it's that usually turns out to be disastrous for a community, for a civilization. Giving unilateral and ultimate control over oneself to a governing power, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous, and history has shown what happens when you give a governing power full control over a society and its people. It doesn't end well, and it's happening again, and it's happening on multiple fronts. Of course, talking specifically about the entertainment side of things, we've seen that Hollywood, as a corporation, if you want to call it that, or as an entity, is entirely dominated by a left wing or leftist view of thinking, far left, however you want to call it. We saw this with what happened to Gina Carano. She was one of the few actresses or actors in Hollywood that wasn't going with the grain. She had been very vocal about many things, including the whole Cervasis bug issue. She's been very vocal on Twitter. People don't like her. She's been doing a lot of trailblazing. She's been doing a lot of speaking out, which is good because we needed that. We need more people like her in that industry. Though I would say that the Hollywood industry is dying, especially with everything that's been happening recently. Um, and with the whole Oscars situation with the Will Smith and Chris Rock thing, or hell, even the Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation, it's all a big distraction. Ultimately, it's something that really doesn't matter when you really boil it down. For the Chris Rock and Will Smith situation, it was two dudes going at it. One guy gets slapped, and suddenly the entire world focuses in on that, as if that's something that really matters in the end. A bunch of Hollywood elitists have a little hissy fit, and then suddenly the world stops, right? Then, of course, you have the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard situation, which is sort of twofold, I would say, because on one hand, ultimately, it really is irrelevant in the sense that, in a sort of grand world viewing scale, it is irrelevant. It's two people that are having a hissy fit, a formerly married couple, and they have both of their own personal issues. At the same time, though, people are looking at this with a set of lenses or a set of eyes that has been sort of frowned upon, is the idea that men can be abused by women. Uh, Looking particularly in the relationship situation, usually it's always the abusive husband towards the woman, though in this case now it's the abusive wife abusing the husband. So it's a sort of switch, but one of the prevailing arguments or one of the viewpoints or talking points up until now has been that men can't be abused by women, that it's always the other way around. And this goes back to something that I've talked about many times on the War and Pop Culture, is the effect that identity politics has had on our society as a whole. Here on this channel we talk mainly about entertainment, though at the same time it's hard not to discuss everything else because it's all connected. When you control the culture, you control the society. Um, a lot of people get their morals or representation of their morals from film or TV, which can be good and bad. Um, Certainly, there are great films and TV shows and entertainment media that have really shown some positivity with our society, particularly here in the West. The idea of freedom of expression, being able to accomplish goals in life that you want to accomplish, to set out for new horizons. A great example of this is the original Star Wars, A New Hope, where you have Luke Skywalker, who is just this average farm boy who has dreams and aspirations of leaving the barren wasteland that is Tatooine, and making something of himself. And of course, he gets into a much bigger world, as Obi-Wan says. You're taking your first steps into a larger world, and then as you go through the original trilogy and you get to the very end, you see how Luke has um, accomplished becoming a Jedi, and now he's trying to save his father, which ultimately he does. And he was willing to sacrifice his own life to save someone that he cares about. And that's a very inspiring message, especially when the father does that for his son. He gives his life to save his son. That's a positive message. And that's sort of the topic that I really want to discuss here, is the idea of messages in film or agendas. We'll be focusing a lot on agendas because the problem with a lot of modern cinema is that they've become so heavy handed with some form of political messaging that it takes you out of the film. And again, the primary the primary message that's being pushed or ham-fisted down people's throats is the identity politics side of things. Many franchises, corporations, companies that are developing these different series, whether it be the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the DC films, comics, all of those things. Every single one of them, it has gone deep into identity politics. Even shows like Doctor Who, with the introduction of the first female doctor, right? That whole situation there was just blatant identity politics in your face, and the problem is that they become so bold with their political pushing, and there are people that are so blind to it that they're blindly supporting these corporations because they feel that they can't live without those entertainment media. And the truth of the matter is that you can live without the Marvel shit. You can live without the DC Comics shit. You can find other things. They're out there. And my prediction is that very soon we're going to start seeing a rise in alternative entertainment that are going to rival and hopefully overtake what we have now. Why? Because that's what needs to happen. I don't want to see my favorite superheroes go away per se. I love Wolverine, I love Batman, Superman, all these classic characters and heroes that I grew up with as a child. The problem is that the companies that own those characters are so mentally screwed in the head that I cannot, in all good conscience, support them. Why would I give my money and why would I support people that don't like me, that see me as evil or wrong for having a certain viewpoint, or not even having a certain viewpoint, but just not sharing their viewpoints? You make a critique or a criticism about, for example, a tokenization of a character. Let's say you make a female Thor, right? which they did, Jane Foster's Thor. And you criticize that and say, why are you making a female Thor when Thor isn't a mantle, right? Because it's always a mantle argument that, it's a name that can be passed down. Batman is a mantle, Wolverine is a mantle, all this bullshit. It's not. Wolverine isn't a mantle, Superman isn't a mantle, Batman is not a mantle. These characters are not mantles. They are their own characters, and they should stay that way because we don't need extra copies of the same character. But you criticize something like female Thor, or you criticize something like a black Batman, and you'll be labeled as a racist or a sexist because you don't like those characters. And this idea about pushing or wanting to have representation, that's the argument that these people have, is that, we just want equality. We want diversity, inclusion, representation of these oppressed minority groups. The problem with that entire statement is that you're continuing to call these people victims. And if you tell a lie long enough, then it becomes the truth. You keep calling these different groups of people oppressed by the system. You're telling them that they're not going to succeed in life because some boogeyman is out to get them or a corporation does not support you. Looking at the LGBT community, for example, that couldn't be farther from the truth, because you see so many corporations, you see so many different governing bodies, particularly here in the West, that support this community, the LGBT community. They literally have flags, the rainbow flag, flying outside embassies, like U.S. embassies. I think they even have it at the United Nations too. They have it in the military as well. They literally fly the rainbow flag, and you're telling me that you're still oppressed. You have the president of the United States that openly supports you. You have many different governing bodies that support you, yet you're still oppressed. You're getting representation in entertainment, yet you're still oppressed. And look, that's just one aspect of life, or those are different aspects. There's always going to be people that are not going to like someone for whatever reason. And the thing is that you have to learn to accept that. We all have to. The truth of the matter is that you're never going to please everyone. And there's always going to be somebody that won't like you for whatever reason. And it doesn't matter if you are part of the LGBT community or not. Somebody will find something to not like about you, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And you really shouldn't have to worry about those people, because most of those people, they're not really relevant, in the sense that, I'll give you an example. You most likely have some racist white person with a backwards way of thinking, hillbilly country redneck that has a problem with black people, living in some nowhere town in the middle of the US. And you're telling me that you're worried about that one person who you're probably never going to meet, and you have this idea that that kind of person is nationwide in positions of power and constantly seek to undermine you as an individual daily. That is a mindset that these people have, and it is a false mindset. And it's almost an excuse if you really think about it. It's an excuse to say, well, you know what? Because I'm oppressed, I don't really have to work because I'm oppressed, and therefore I should have reparations, right? I should have reparations for slavery, for example. There are people here in the U.S. that still believe that. They believe that black people should get reparations for slavery, even though nobody alive today in this country ever experienced the slavery of the 1700s or the 1600s, going back. So that notion is completely ridiculous. And again, you're burying people with a mindset of being a victim for the rest of their lives, and then they won't try to accomplish anything because they'll just play the victim Olympics. How can you be a professional victim today, right? In the victim Olympics, you have like different categories. You have multiple minority groups that are considered oppressed, but who's more oppressed? For example, you have a gay white woman. Then you have a gay black woman. So who's more oppressed? They're both gay, but one's white and one's black. So according to the Victim Olympics, the gay black woman is more oppressed than the gay white woman. They're both oppressed, but who's more oppressed, right? This is the sort of mindset that these people operate on. And you can see that when you listen to interviews with these people or videos where these people are talking. And the problem is that these people are also in positions of power, which is ridiculous. I mean, California is supposedly, the utopia for that community, because that's, California is one of the states where you get the most support for these things, for the identity politics focus. Yet it's a shithole. Maybe not every area, to be fair. It's just a lot of that state is a shithole, unfortunately, and it was allowed to go that way because of the different politics that were put in place, and the degenerates that meander there. And that may seem heavy-handed. It's just at this point you have to be heavy-handed because it's the truth. That's why you have so many people that have been fleeing to Texas, because I mean, not even just Texas, but just leaving these different strongholds in general, because the quality of life is very low in those areas. And then when you call these things out, when you have these politicians try and lecture you about, your white privilege. If you're a white person, you got white privilege. Or when you have these people that are complaining about the "Don't Say Gay" bill, or in more recent news, uh, Roe v. Wade being overturned, and people thinking that abortion will be made illegal nationwide, and it shows the ignorance that these people have, and they feel so threatened. And of course, I have my own views on the whole abortion thing. I won't go into that here because that's not really what this video is about. But regardless, identity politics has affected so much, and you guys already know. And all you have to do is just watch one of the mainstream news sources for a few minutes, and you'll see what I mean. Um, I mean, when you have an elected official who is a woman who was asked a question about what is a woman, the question was, "What is a woman?" And the woman could not identify what a woman was because she said she wasn't a biologist. This sort of stupidity is is prevalent because 10 years ago it was allowed to grow. The seeds were planted years ago, and we saw it sprouting very early on. We saw it on college campuses. We saw it with videos like, for example, Ben Shapiro. You know, a lot of us would be laughing at these Ben Shapiro videos where he would go to college campuses and debate or take questions from these college students who were clearly moronic and stupid, and we all laughed at it because of how stupid these people were, and we thought, well, that's never gonna reach the rest of the world. That's not gonna affect mainstream policy and such. But yet here we are, 10 years later, and look what's happened. You know, some what Western civilization is under attack. The Western way of thinking, your freedom of expressions, being able to say what you want and not have to worry about being killed or thrown in jail. Those days are slowly coming behind, getting behind us. You have an attack on children, child making, breeding, however you want to call it, with the whole abortion thing. And you also have an attack on children themselves. For example, Discovery has, or it's called Discovery Plus. They have this new series coming out where it's literally a show about drag queen children. The thing is, with the whole drag queen thing, or being like having like transgender things, a lot of that was relegated to adults, very unusual adults, but adults nonetheless. Where you have men that dress up with heavy makeup, wigs, and act very feminine. Um, it's kind of disturbing. On a personal note, for me personally, it's kind of disturbing that you have people that do that. But to each their own, right? The problem is that now it's getting to the kids, and it's being promoted as something positive for kids to do. And I've seen many videos in the past where you have kids that dress up in drag and they go to strip clubs and do like a little dance performance on stage for adults, and you have adults cheering them on. They even go so far as to stuff money in their pants. Some of them are wearing thongs. And this stuff is allowed to persist under the guise of equality, diversity, and inclusion, and being positive, sending a positive message that anybody can be anything they want to be. Uh, if a kid wants to be a transgender kid, let them. That's the idea. No, you literally have parents. You have, for example, Disney. People. Where they're supporting people or saying it themselves that, yeah, my kids are transgender. I have a transgender child. It's child abuse, man. If you're giving a little boy hormone blockers so that he can't continue to mature and go through puberty to become a man, you're giving this boy or these boys hormone blockers, hormone therapy, whatever, saying that, oh yeah, you can be a drag queen or you can be a little girl if you want to. It's child abuse. And it all starts with the small things. You know, and it's not just the LGBT community, to be fair, okay, because you've had scandals with church priests and preachers that have engaged in very vulgar sexual acts with children. So it's not just one side, it's multiple facets. With that said, what we're seeing most of today is coming from the starting point of diversity and inclusion for the LGBT community, promoting transgender individuals, saying that we need to be more inclusive, right? That may sound positive and it may sound good, to being let's be tolerant, to tolerate these people. The truth of the matter is that we as a society for the past at least 20, 30 years at least have tolerated the existence of these people. Clearly, and no duh, we the world have known that, for example, homosexuals exist. Okay. And, get in line, right? You got different people, different backgrounds, different sexualities, whatever. You exist. You want a medal, you know? And when you really boil it down, it's not about equality. It's about having special treatment, special privileges. Um, and certainly that's what's happening, because you criticize these things and you're labeled as one of the many ists or phobes that they've come up with, being called hateful, toxic, all these terms that are meaningless now because, we've been so desensitized and oversaturated with them, they've lost their meaning. So it's something that we let happen because, looking at the entertainment side of things again, you had the conservative or right leaning side of things look at entertaining as something that was trivial and meaningless. The idea was that why should we have to pay attention to this? You can let the leftists have a heyday with it, because it means nothing. But as I said earlier, when you control the culture, you control the entirety of society. And it's not just entertainment; it's many different things. It just so happens that entertainment is a very big um, has a very big hand in a lot of it, because when you don't want to discuss politics and religion with people, you go to watch movies, entertainment, to get your mind off of the chaos of the real world and to just enjoy yourself. But now you can't even do that because you have two different groups of people. You have the group of people that blindly consume things. I call them sheep. Um, you tell them that there's going to be a black Batman coming to theaters near you, or a black Superman, or a female Thor, then suddenly they're just cheering, just um, like seals, just the bread and circus, right? You just blindly consume. You say, "Oh yeah, this is a good idea because diversity and inclusion," right? And then you have the other group of people that say, "No, I like quality in my entertainment." And you're telling me that you want to have these different groups of people, or you're telling me that you want to have different versions of the same character instead of creating something new. You want to bastardize what I love in order to promote diversity and inclusion, which is not. It's not. It's not positive at all. You have an entire subgenre of films for LGBT people. You have actual LGBT characters, like looking at like Marvel and DC. You actually have characters that are already like that, but you don't utilize them, or you do utilize some of them, and then they just don't sell because your main focus isn't on them being good characters. Your main focus is them being diverse, their sexuality, the sexual orientation, or their gender. That's the focus. It's not. It's no longer about quality storytelling. It's about pushing a political message. And I've criticized it many times. I've said that the idea of putting in all the being so heavy-handed with your messages these days is it's ruining film. And then a common argument is that, well, films have always had messages being pushed. And my response to that is absolutely they have. The difference is that it didn't take over the narrative. I'll give you an example. Godzilla. Godzilla, the original from 1954, was a film that was made by people that witnessed and felt the power of nuclear weapons on their homeland and the devastation that it caused them. And because Japan had lost the war in World War II, they had lost, they were on the losing side. They were heavily censored on what they could produce back then. So they made Godzilla as a form of what you could call protest for nuclear weapons. And it turned into a very popular franchise. Obviously, as the movies went along, that sort of message kind of it was lost just a little bit. Though some movies still had some of that messaging still in there, but it was a well handled film that was sending out a message about nuclear weapons and the dangers of using them. Now you compare that to Doctor Who and the pushing of the female doctor, or anything that has pushed this sort of female empowerment, which it really wasn't female empowerment. It was just over dominating men or making men look bad. You know, because for people in, for example, the 80s, okay, we had our strong female characters there, not only in the comics, but in cinema in general, with, Sarah Connor or Ripley from Aliens. Okay, those are two examples. Or hell, Carrie Fisher from Star Wars, right? You have these strong female characters that people didn't complain about for being strong. This idea that men don't like strong women in lead roles or don't like women in these franchises is ludicrous, especially when you talk to the guys that want women to share this stuff with. Because for heterosexual men, one of the best things that you could have is to have a girlfriend or a wife who's into the same stuff you're into. It's something that you can share. It's something else that you can bond over. Okay. So this idea that men don't want women in these positions sounds retarded, and that's because it is retarded. It's a made up narrative that is meant to, again, further push these different agendas that these different groups of people have. And it's ruining film because the messages are so heavy handed, and that the movies are focusing purely on this message. The writing, the narrative, the characters, they're all centered around this idea of whatever identity politics message they want to push. And so, with people that are still supporting Marvel or Marvel slash Disney, whatever, saying, oh yeah, Disney, they support the LGBT community, or you have, like Bob Chapek groveling essentially, asking for forgiveness from the LGBT community, because this whole "don't say gay" bill thing. But um, you still censor certain things in certain movies, or in the case of like the Eternals, you don't have the Eternals playing in China or Russia because China and Russia said "fuck you" and your identity politics messaging, and then those countries try and lecture us about the identity politics. But the thing is that with China, especially and particularly, they have a huge say in movies here in this country. Hollywood is practically owned by the Chinese in many ways. So in that aspect, they can kiss my ass, China and Hollywood, but mainly China. Uh, in regards for them lecturing us, like the president there or the prime minister talking about how the identity politics and the focus on it has ruined the West. It's like, yeah, no shit, you're partially contributing to that because you have a huge stake in Hollywood. So the overall point is that Hollywood and the leftist overlords that control it have ruined entertainment, which is why we need to be promoting more independent film, independent comics, and independent entertainment in general, because we need to replace these dickwads, these assholes. They need to be replaced. And eventually they will. It's going to take some time and it won't be easy, but we're not in this for it to be easy. We're in it to win. We have to, because so many franchises have fallen from grace or have just straight up died because there's been a focus on agenda pushing and no longer about entertainment. And it's ruined the films. It's ruined my enjoyment of it. That's why I will not be reviewing the Obi-Wan series. Most likely I won't even watch it, because why would I watch it? Especially after what happened to Gina Carano. When Gina Carano was fired, I was pretty much done with Star Wars. I mean, I watched the Book of Boba Fett, I reviewed it, but I shouldn't have really after they fired her. But that's a mistake I won't be making again. I'm not even touching it because um, they don't deserve the views, and you're going to have people that will continue to worship or to continue supporting these people, and they won't get it. They won't understand it until it's probably too late. But that's why we need to get on it now. On if you're going to be creating your own series, like a comic book series, or promoting independent film, like I am, get on it now, because the ground is very fertile. Because when the pendulum swings in the opposite direction, when the tide begins to turn, people will be looking for alternate forms of entertainment. I mean, it's already happening, right? Where people are already looking for alternatives, and there are quite a few of them out there. And they just make sure that you're supporting quality alternatives. Don't support an alternative merely because it's an alternative. You need to be able to support something that is quality, that can rival what we have now, or what's left of what used to be. Because it's not going to get better with Marvel or DC. These people, these corrupt pieces of shit that have been polluting the beautiful pool of entertainment the people that are promoting the sexualization of children through means of drag queens or through the child abuse that is transgendered children. And these people that are so afraid of this "Don't Say Gay" bill that doesn't even say "Don't Say Gay," but they take it as an attack on their sexuality, and they're the only motherfuckers that seem to think that, even though the bill clearly states any form of talk of sexuality, sexual orientation, gender identity, all these things that little children do not need to be hearing. Okay, these people are so afraid of it, and it tells a lot. It tells a lot. So just keep fighting the good fight. Eventually, we're going to win. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some hard work, but we're going to get there. And we have to, because with the way shit's going now, and this is not even talking about the other stuff going on in the world, but I wanted to do my best to focus on entertainment as much as possible. I did get off on a tangent a little bit, but regardless of that, just don't give your money to people who hate you. Actually consider what you're supporting, the entertainment that you choose to consume, the entertainment that you're putting showing your children, right? Go back to some of the older films, man. That's one of my best pieces of advice, to go back to some of the older films, especially in regards to Star Wars. Just completely ignore the sequel trilogy. If you're into monster movies like I am, go check out the Godzilla films. Some of them are pretty cheesy, but I like all of them because I'm a Godzilla fan. So, just stop supporting these people that hate you. They like your money, but they don't like you. And you might have this mindset, well, I don't want to hurt the people involved in these projects because not everybody involved in these projects is bad like them. The thing is that so long as you continue to give these people your money, they will continue to promote shit. And they will continue to dominate the industry, and they will continue to insult you. So at a certain point, you have to say enough is enough. Okay. This is a war. This is a war on pop culture. This is a war on culture. This is a war on ideas of liberty and freedom of expression. And it is a war that we have to win. And in order to do that, you have to make some sacrifices. In this case, it means dropping off these disgusting entertainment franchises that have been ran into the ground. Go find alternatives, because they are out there. There are people that are very passionate about what they do. Promote their content. Make sure that they can get off the ground and that they can be profitable. And if they're pushing good content, then give them your support. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going to do myself in regards to making my own comic series. It's slowly coming on, but it's a project that I am fully dedicated to because I have to. So with that all being said, thank you guys very much for watching, listening, and supporting. Stay tuned next week for the Fall of Camp Blood watch along with Peter Anthony and Kyle Curtis Flett. Also be on the lookout for probably a gaming stream, maybe later tonight as of recording this, or maybe tomorrow. We'll see. But anyways, remember that the entertainment is out there. I'm Special Agent Spooky Clutter.
I'm Special Agent Carter Sauce.
Special Agent Dr. Rick Toffin.
And until next time, fellow investigators, remember,
the entertainment is out there.